You fall in love. Then comes the difficult task of planning the perfect wedding. Lifting the veil, an inside look at wedding planning. And here's your host, Wedding Entertainment Director, Larry Williams.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode. I'm coming to you today from the Peppermill Casino Resort here in the center of Reno. Just a beautiful facility that caters a lot to weddings and wedding reception celebrations. Now, you've picked out the wedding date by now. Next comes the rather difficult task to select all the vendors. And how do you know what order to select those vendors? What's the highest priority? I'm going to give you some tips on that in just a minute. But first, I just want to let you know that number one, you, the bride and groom, have one of the most difficult jobs in the world, and that is to become an expert on how to select and choose 10, 15, 20 different types of vendors for your wedding day. How do you do that? You've got to somehow become an expert on picking florists, on picking caterers, picking the facility, picking the DJ and the photographer and the cake expert, photo booth person. How do you become an expert on all of those things? It's a pretty difficult task, but I'm going to give you the order that I think works best in selecting the vendors that you're going to be pooling from and interviewing. I'm going to give you those tips in just a moment, but there are some things you can do before even picking vendors. One of them is pick your bridesmaids and groomsmen. That's a great place to start, just to kind of get an organization of how many bridesmaids and groomsmen on each side you're going to be selecting. Your flower girl and ring bearer. You might want to think about picking a color scheme or selecting the guest list and how big of a wedding you want. Those are all things you can do before selecting any vendors. It helps to know how big the wedding is going to be so you know what facility that you need to look at. If you're looking at 50 to 75 people, you might want to trim down to a really great looking small facility. Or if you have a wedding of 200, 300, 400 people, then of course you need to start selecting vendors that can accommodate that many people, that many guests. You can also pick out the wedding colors. You can pick out the wedding theme. Lots of things there that you can do in advance of selecting the vendors. But stay tuned. In just a few moments, I'm going to give you some tips and ideas on how to prioritize the vendor selection process.
If you're planning an upcoming wedding, consider this. The Reno Tahoe DJ Company is a nationally recognized provider of first-class wedding entertainment. Professional, experienced, appropriate. Expect the finest in quality from the first consultation to the final dance.
The Reno Tahoe DJ Company, referred by more wedding professionals and preferred by more brides. Visit renodj.com. Welcome back. And now some tips on how to prioritize the vendor selection process. Now, this is not an exact science, and it's different for everybody. And there are times where you're going to have a small budget wedding and you might be using a family friend to do one thing or another. Of course, we want to encourage you to always use professionals because it could take one fly in the ointment, so to speak, to kind of mess things up. You want people who do this for a living. So I've always told people in the past that it's best to have the smallest package from a really good vendor or professional than have the biggest package that includes everything for a price that's too good to be true. Okay? So if it's free services coming from your friend, it might be better to let your friend enjoy the wedding rather than work at the wedding, especially if it's something they don't do for a living. You don't want people doing a hobby, doing something as a hobby and working at your wedding. It never usually works out well. So I'm going to give you the list on what I feel works best for prioritizing that vendor selection process. Now, this is going to be different for all people. And again, you're going to find wedding vendors that say, hey, I should be the first person they book. I'm never going to please everybody. So this is what I think works best. I'm going to give you the reason why. I think the first place to start is your venue, okay? Securing the venue is the most important. Again, after you've picked your guest list and how big that wedding is going to be, try to find something that fits the theme or fits, the type of people you are, whether it's a place like this in a casino resort that has some marvelous food and great places to get pictures and great accommodations to have people stay overnight. There's so many great benefits to having a hotel or a casino hotel. There's also great benefits to having, a hot springs or having your wedding celebration on a golf course resort or at a beachfront property. It all depends on the opulence of what you want, how laid back or how, great it is. But you can't really start calling photographers and DJs and caterers and people like that unless you've, selected your venue. You got to select the date and you got to select the venue. Once you've found the venue that you've fallen in love with, then you can start, searching for the other, type of people and prioritize them. Next up, I think you should do is look at the solo businesses, the people that do this, and they don't take, 2, 3, 4, or 5 bookings a day. And those would be people like photographers. Generally, most photographers work alone, or they might have an assistant, but most of them don't have like 15 different photographers that work for them. So the thing is, you want to kind of select a photographer that might be, best suited for you, one you kind of click with, and because they book up early. Selecting that photographer 9 months, even 12 months or 18 months in advance is important. The good ones book up really, really fast. A DJ, that's another one. Most DJs work alone as well. Some are what's called multi-op systems or system operators, and they send out people that work for them. That happens a lot too. But for the most part, the great DJ companies do book up quickly. So select a DJ company 9 months or 12 months out because they're already booking into next year. Musicians, that's another one. When you're working with a band or with a harpist or a solo guitar player for a ceremony, again, these are people that work alone. These are solo vendors and they book up rather quickly. An officiant, wedding coordinators, these people as well. Most wedding coordinators, they're dedicated solely to you for that day, and they've got a lot of pre-planning work these wedding planners and wedding coordinators have. So again, these are solo vendors that work alone, and they might have a team of people that work with them that day, or they send out that day, but for the most part, you're reserving them for that day. So after you've selected the venue, look closely at hiring these solo vendors that will be working on your behalf. Next up is things like the wedding dress and the bridesmaid dresses and groomsmen tuxedos. These are places you'll go to. These are walk-in stores, and they need a lot of time too to prepare because there'll be a lot of fittings. There'll be fittings and alterations and things like that they have to go for. So when you're looking at your wedding dress, your bridesmaid dresses, your groomsmen tuxes, everybody's got to be fitted. There's going to be corrections and alterations. They need many months in advance to prepare. So those are things that you want to work towards as well. Pretty far out if you can. The farther out, the better. And next up is things like cakes and florists, rentals, limos, linens. Again, people that do cakes, they generally will do more than one cake per day. So they're not a solo type of, solely dedicated to you for that day. You have them like you do a photographer. You go to a cake specialist, they can maybe do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cakes on any given wedding Saturday. The same is true for linens and florists and limo drivers and this sort of thing. So again, they are not solo type of vendors. They might be a private business owned by one person, but they don't work alone and they can do more than just one wedding a day. So those are the other people you want to look at as well. And finally, specialty services, things like photo booths, room blocks. Here at a hotel, you got to get those room blocks pretty early as well. Invitations, selecting a place for a rehearsal dinner. Those are all very important as well. But again, on the priority scale, maybe the room blocks, especially if it's a big holiday weekend, you got to get those room blocks early. But those are some things too. Specialty services, photo booths and the like. Again, somebody who has a photo booth company, they may have several photo booths that they send out to a particular weddings. So they may not be a solo vendor that only does one per day. Now you might find that if you do, book them early. Anybody that does this and they solely do this themselves, and they don't have employees where they send out and do lots of weddings per day, those are the people you want to book first. Book those solo entrepreneurs, those solo wedding specialists, those solo vendors. Again, these are photographers, DJs, and people like that. So musicians, again, if you have a band or a guitar player or harp player, coordinators and that sort of thing, they generally will work alone, or they might have a team working with them, but they don't take multiple weddings in one day. Okay, those people that work as solo entrepreneurs and vendors that just do one wedding per day, whether they have a team with them or not, they just work that one wedding. Those are the folks you want to lock up pretty early. So venue is always first, and then after that you can look at selecting the other folks. I hope that helps, gives you a few pointers and tips and ideas, and we'll see you next time on Lifting the Veil. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on social media.